Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, peace be upon us all. Can you hear me clearly? If so, please send a fire emoji in the chat box below. Good morning to all our friends and attendees from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. Welcome to the public webinar, Rethinking Traditional Performing Arts Through Regional Dialogues. As part of Southeast Asia, I am certainly familiar with the saying, you don't know, you don't love. I'm Nessa Theo. I'm a visual artist and a researcher based in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And for 3 hours or so, I will be your host and moderator. Kindly be reminded to fill out the attendance sheet that has been shared in the chat box. We would like to welcome our distinguished guest. Representatives from the UNESCO Regional Office in Jakarta, Ms. Moe Chiba, along with her team. Representatives from the Temasek Foundation, Ms. Sharon Kwek. This morning's speakers, Ms. Ananya Bhattacharya, Ms. Heli Minarti, Joko Katas, and Dr. Noramin Farid. Representatives from universities and arts education institutions in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, as well as their students. Representatives from arts and cultural organizations across Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. And of course, to everyone from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore who are joining us through our social media platforms. Before we continue this event, it would be good to begin with a prayer first. So, according to our respective religions and beliefs, let's begin our prayer. Prayer begins. Amen. As we begin today's webinar, allow me to briefly introduce the context of our session. Traditional performing arts are an important part of Southeast Asia's cultural heritage, carrying shared memory, values, and local wisdom. However, many of these art forms are now facing challenges, from shifting audience interests to the rise of digital entertainment, making it difficult for traditional performers to adapt and stay visible. In line with its mandate to safeguard cultural heritage, UNESCO is exploring ways to support the sustainability of traditional performing arts through regional exchange, cross-border collaboration, and joint visibility efforts. These initiatives aim to ensure that traditional performing arts remain dynamic and relevant in today's context. Today's public webinar brings in participants from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. We have artists, arts managers, and performing arts students to share insights and explore ideas for sustaining traditional performing arts in the region. This event is part of the program Embracing Shared Heritage Through Performing Arts, supported by Temasek Foundation since July 2025. We hope that today's dialogue will inspire new perspectives, encourage collaboration, and spark collective efforts to keep our shared heritage living. Now, it's time to begin our morning's activities. We will start with our welcoming remarks. We invite the Chief of Culture Sector, UNESCO Regional Office in Jakarta, Ms. Moe Chiba. Ms. Moe Chiba, please go ahead. The time is yours.
Thank you very much, Nessa. Do you hear my voice clearly?
Yes.
Great. Honorable representatives from the Temasek Foundation, my friend Sharon Kwek, our 4 distinguished speakers, Ananya Bhattacharya from India, my very old friend, Ms. Heli Minarti from Indonesia, Ms. Jo Kukatas from Malaysia, and Dr. Noramin Farid from Singapore, esteemed members of government and civil society, lecturers, students, artists, and art organizations from Malaysia, Singapore, and in Indonesia, and old colleagues from National Commission for UNESCO. Good morning, and a warm welcome to our webinar on rethinking traditional performing arts through regional dialogues. On behalf of UNESCO, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. As Ness already mentioned, across Southeast Asia, traditional performing arts carry the memory, wisdom, and worldviews of our communities. They remind us that heritage is not simply an old legacy of the past, but a living practice, sustained through creativity, dialogue, and transmission. Yet, we'll agree there are challenges, shifting audience habits, shrinking performance spaces, and that the risk that these forms become reduced to static symbols rather than vibrant expressions of community identity. So today's regional dialogue is therefore both timely and essential. Our speakers bring perspectives that speak directly to the heart of this challenge. They ask us difficult but necessary questions. How do we honor traditions without freezing it? How do we enable artistic innovation without compromising cultural integrity? And how do we ensure that communities who hold these traditions remains at the center of any creative process? The experience reminds us that protecting heritage and encouraging artistic innovation can go hand in hand. When creative processes respect communities, acknowledge cultural ownership, and uphold the voice of knowledge holders, collaboration can enrich the work of artists, broaden participation, and deepen cultural connections across the regions. Well, UNESCO and its cultural conventions, the cultural heritage conventions, we have 6 of them, in some ways unintentionally contributed to shifting heritage discourse towards government institutions and academic frameworks. This has sometimes resulted in traditional community practices, including performing arts, being treated as objects of policy, national branding, or scholarly analysis only. In the process, the living, evolving, and creative nature of community practices has too often been constrained rather than nurtured. If our goal is true revitalization, then traditional performing arts must be re-embedded in the contemporary artistic landscape, not preserved as museum pieces, but recognized as active contributors to today's creative expression. This is why today's dialogue is so important. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the insights of our distinguished speakers who come to us not only as experts, but as community activists, artists, and creators whose work embodies this living continuity. This webinar is part of the broader program Embracing Shared Heritage Through Performing Arts, supported by the Temasek Foundation. It reflects our collective belief that regional cooperation is key because our artistic traditions have always traveled, interacted, and evolved across the straits, the seas, and the many cultural meeting points of the region. So let us use this space to learn from one another, to question our assumptions, and to imagine new models of co-creation with traditional performing arts that are ethical, inclusive, and future-oriented. Once again, thank you very much for being part of this important conversation. I wish you a rich and inspiring exchange for 3 hours to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moichiba, for your welcoming remarks. Next, we will move to our first presentation in today's meeting, which will be delivered by Ms. Ananya Bhattacharya. Before we begin the session, allow me to read her profile. Ananya Bhattacharya is director and co-founder of banglanatak.com, a social enterprise headquartered in Kolkata, India, working for inclusive and sustainable development, leveraging cultural heritage to empower rural and indigenous communities. With a background in electrical engineering from the Jadavpur University and a master's degree in sustainable development from the Staffordshire University as a Commonwealth Scholar, Ananya specializes in gender, culture, and sustainability. For around 25 years, she has worked closely with communities to safeguard their cultural traditions, ensuring that these treasures continue to thrive and contribute to economic and social well-being and resilience. Ananya is a member of UNESCO Global Network of Facilitators supporting capacity building on safeguarding of ICH and harnessing ICH for sustainable development. Hello, Ms. Ananya. Can you hear us clearly?
Yes. Can
Great.
you hear me?
Yes, great. The stage is yours.
Good morning. Namaskar from Kolkata in India. I'd like to start by thanking the Temasek Foundation and UNESCO for organizing this wonderful dialogue and for inviting us to share our experiences from India. Art is fundamental to being human. So as long as people have gathered, communities have gathered, even before perhaps we learn to read and write, performing art has been the way people communicated and engaged with life. So it was through the rhythms, through the songs, through the stories, the people welcomed the seasons, honored the land, invoked the divine, and found their place in the universe. So today, I'm going to talk about ethical collaboration and creative reinterpretation with traditional performing arts. Next, please. So in the next half an hour or so, I'm going to share our experiences from our initiative Art for Life in India, and also some of the perspectives shaped by the UNESCO 2003 Convention and intercultural theories. Next, please. So, as I was discussing and Moe also highlighted, art is a social compass. It is a collective memory. And I think this is something we really need to remember as we discuss today about contemporary art projects and traditional art. Because art was not created for entertainment alone, right? It is a living, evolving uh, body of knowledge, skills, and practice, which shaped our ecological wisdom, our emotional intelligence, our worldviews. So, today, with a globalized world, with digital technology and cultural exchange, when we discuss about these exchanges, we must remember this original premise of traditional arts. So the task is not only to innovate or collaborate, but to do it ethically. That is why ethics is very important in the discussion and dialogue. So contemporary creativity can be a very powerful ally to safeguarding. So I'm going to share some of the insights from our Art for Life initiative, which is now more than 2 decades old. And we have worked with diverse communities across India, as you see in the map, in 10 states. And they range from, the mountain communities, deserts, plains, coastal areas, and plateaus. So with diverse ethnography, we have worked with more than 70,000 folk artists and craftspeople. Now, the premise of Art for Life is brings together the village, the artist, the art. The focus is not only just to document and promote art, but also to empower the artist to be able to manage, govern, and innovate and reach out to new audiences and markets as micro entrepreneurs, and to build the villages as cultural hubs. So it's not about only going to staged performance, but to create opportunities for people to experience ways of life. And what happened over last 2 decades is not only the art forms are thriving and found new energy, they were all in a very fragile state when we started, but now it has really become a means of livelihood with young people championing their traditions. And it has contributed also to a diverse set of sustainable development goals, ranging from education of children, improved quality of life, health, and most importantly, peace and social inclusion. So women who never stepped out of their home in the villages are now traveling across the country and the world and participating in various contemporary art projects. Next, please. Now, I would like to pin the uh, discussion from a learning of a project we did in partnership with Coventry University. We named it HIPAMS, Heritage Sensitive IP and Marketing Strategies, because we were researching positive ways of heritage sensitive commercialization. And at the end of the research, we came up with a very strong framework, which is shown here, that there are inherently four key components. One is, of course, the skill repertoire. The knowledge system, the skills, these needs to be nurtured. These will shape the value of the heritage, right? These shape the value of the heritage. The next is the reputation, the awareness, whether people know about it. And of course, the community dignity, the credibility, how is it being nurtured? The third is the people's agency. The communities has to be leading the safeguarding process, the commercialization process, the cultural exchanges, and heritage sensitive innovation. Because life does not stand still, life is ever evolving. So creativity must remain rooted in the tradition. It must not be imposed from the outside. I think that is the key word. And authorship, dignity, identity, these cannot be compromised. So in this process of creative collaboration, commercialization, what is very important, that the community has the right to choose. They need to, in fact, they need to target heritage sensitive audiences, those who will value the fairness, who will value the authenticity. Now, so the crux are the three questions here, that whenever we are planning these collaborations, these exchanges, whose narrative are we saying? What is the value we are celebrating? Whose economic gain is being secured in the process? These questions need to guide all the interventions, and ethical safeguarding is only possible when it is rooted in community agency. Next, please. Over the last, let's say, a decade, more than 500 folk artists, they have traveled across the continents to countries in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, even to USA. And I'll share some of our experiences on how the collaboration has strengthened the art form. What we've seen is that cultural dialogue deepens understanding of new audiences and markets. As the artists gain insight from other performers, other traditions, they develop a deep understanding. They listen to each other's stories, aesthetics, worldview, and the strongest collaborations are those where both sides shape the outcome and innovations organically grow from that dialogue. If we look at research on interculturalism, we find that perhaps earlier what happened was that it was not always equal, especially in international platforms, and there was many examples are there of stereotyping, of tokenism and things like that. So where collaboration strengthens only when such exchange, such collaboration is deep, is long term, has a reciprocal and shared relationship. It is shaped by the community's context, and the community, the performers, they have the opportunity for questioning and for dialogue. When these conditions exist, then collaboration strengthens. So here are some examples in the photos you see. So Baul musicians are like the Sufi musicians of Bengal, and they were unheard of and they never earned, because their philosophy is to attain the divine You have to know yourself and you have to love your brothers. You have to love humanity. That is the essence of Baul music and Baul philosophy. So we started cultural exchange programs with other Sufi musicians in a festival called Sufi Sutra in 2011. And that festival still carries on in the name of Surjahan. It is there in January next year. And over the years, more than 35 countries have participated. So this festival has become a platform for exchange, for collaboration, and the Bauls have traveled the world and musicians come to India. And you see some of the examples. They have published CDs, they have published recordings, and musicians now earn from their performance. And the average age when we started was more than 50. And now it is in the range of 30s and 40s, and there are many women bowl singers who are making their mark. The other from dance photo you are seeing is a Bangara community from Australia, and the Chow dancers, a very vibrant masked dance from India. So here they had their dialogue over art residency of 15 days and co-created a production. So cultural spaces really provide a strong platform for such exchanges. Foucault reminds us that body is really a site which is carrying histories and historical memory and power. So cultural exchange is not about blending styles or about fusion, but what it is a negotiation of this power, this identity. In India, we have a very noted um, playwright, theatre director, Habib Tanvir, who integrated the folk dances of a tribal belt called Chhattisgarh, which is in central India. And he allowed the communities, he led the communities, he created the platform for the dancers to use their bodies, their humor, their improvisational intelligence to shape the stage in their own terms. And fascinating drama, which are continuing over years, are their examples like Charandas Chor and others. So when we work in this spirit, collaboration becomes transformative and not extractive, and cultural exchange becomes a model for how diverse communities can coexist with dignity and deep respect. Next, please. In India, we primarily work with indigenous and rural communities, and many of these dancers are of primary literacy level or neo-literates. So capacity building, we have found, is very important so that they can work in an equal footing with dancers and performers and musicians from other countries. So we invest a lot in capacity building. You see here in the first photo, the artists, they celebrate nature, they celebrate harvest, they celebrate marriage. So they are not conscious of the techniques of stage performance. So as part of capacity building, they're trained on understanding the stage, on entering and exiting the stage. Again, they're dancing for their own enjoyment. But when we know in professional dance world, you have to manage yourself physically, emotionally. So capacity building addresses that, how they can better manage their self, how can they manage their emotions. It also works on developing team spirit, developing collective identity, and of course the techniques of rhythm, the use of mics and things like that. So these are very important when we are working with rural and indigenous communities who did not have the exposure to these aspects of professional performance. So empowerment is basically making the artist able so that they can communicate their artistic intent, they can negotiate their rights, they can manage their teams, they can navigate digital spaces. We have given a lot of focus on digital literacy so that they can handle their physical and emotional well-being. Again, we have this notion that, ICH is coming down through generations. So what does IP play? How can IP play a role? But, when you're recording, when you're sharing, you have a copyright of that. So we also work on building understanding on these. I think these are very critical components to prepare the artists before exposing them to other forms and the global arena. Next, please. So what has been some of the outcomes? What we realized that innovation emerges in this process from the curiosity, respect, and shared imagination. And as they co-create without extraction, without imposition, without tokenism, new products which are heritage sensitive innovation, they come to the market. So we had Chow dancers who worked with other storytelling tradition called Patachitra, where the painters paint stories and sing. And they did a rendition of Macbeth, a completely different story. Folk instruments always had a very marginal role. In the performances, they were in a site playing the instruments. But now, folk instrument itself has become an offering. And here we see Kamal Kepa, who is playing a musical instrument called Dotara. And he actually does performances for hours playing that instrument. And recently, he mesmerized audiences in France. The poets, they write new songs and they publish new music. I'm from a part of India called Bengal, and our philosophy, our worldviews are shaped by the first Asian Nobel laureate, Rabindranath Tagore. Nearly a century back, in 1927, Tagore went to Indonesia. And when he visited Java and Bali, he was mesmerized by the dances. And he actually said in his work or letters from a traveler to Java that it's wonderful how the old that has been lost has been regained and made new. And he brought that experience. And at Shantiniketan, which is a World Heritage Site, he started a dance form called Rabindra Nritta, which took elements from Javanese and Balinese dance of storytelling. He also brought batik to Bengal. And today, through that experience of exchange and fusion a century back, we still have these living traditions which still carry the legacy of a cultural exchange which took place a century ago. That is the power of creative collaboration. Next, please. So, what happens whenever we are doing cultural exchange, whenever the artists are traveling? That quells their confidence, that strengthens their community identity and pride. So we have realized that visibility itself is a powerful force for safeguarding as artists travel with dignity, as their contexts, as they share their contexts with new audiences, as they narrate the meaning and the values of the heritage. So that is the power of collaboration. That is the power of contemporary projects, that it is creating opportunity and recognition and not a replacement. When, of course, as we discussed, the basic premise of agency of narrative control, these are protected. Next, please. Here I share the ethical principles of the UNESCO 2003 convention. These are available online. And I think if we go through that and if we make it part of our work strategy, it will be very strong approach. So what these principles do, they remind us that safeguarding ICH or intangible cultural heritage is fundamentally about protecting people, their rights, their identities, and worldview. And the primacy rests on the agency of the communities, transparency in collaboration, respect for human rights, accessibility to cultural resources, cultural diversity, and inclusion. So communities have to lead safeguarding. They have to have the primary responsibility over this process of heritage sensitive innovation. They will have to have the right to practice and transmit. and judge the value of their heritage, not external actors. And they are the ones who can identify the risks and threats of commodification or misrepresentation. So this agency is extremely important. Next, please. In all our traditions, next, please. In all our traditions, in all our traditional art forms, as we started saying, that it was about our ecological wisdom, about our worldview, about our way to pay respect. So there are sacred elements, and this, whenever there is a creative collaboration, this must be addressed with sensitivity. So when ignored, it leads to misrepresentation, to community disempowerment, to loss of meaning and values. So we need to honor the ritual boundaries and the lineage protocols. You know, there might be sacred mass, so we can't trivialize them. There might be invocation cycles, the rituals. So if we can co-create with the practitioners, if we can understand these values, we can avoid these pitfalls. So we are now working with indigenous communities in an area in central India called central South India called Koraput. And their dances, you know, whenever they dance, they do invocation. Now, when they're taking their performance for the first time to stage and working with other cultures, what they have done, you see here, they have put that invocation as part of their offering, so that you know the people who do not know about their culture understand from where the dance is coming. In Rajasthan, we have Kalbelias, the dancers here you see in the desert. It is also inscribed in the UNESCO representative list of humanity. Now, originally, the Kalbelias were nomadic communities and they were snake charmers. Now, with new laws and regulations, you're not allowed to be snake charmers anymore. So what the community does is the women, they dance with serpent movements. So they innovated and they took their art, their tradition, their music to a different scale. And they could collaborate and co-create new productions with the desert musicians who are called the Langas and the Manganiers. So, you know, if we do these cross-cultural exchanges, heritage finds new ways of continuity, of sustainability. Next, please. Now, I'd also like to touch upon the new challenges of the digital world. I briefly mentioned about recording. We are using dances, we are using elements of traditional performing arts in films, in audio visuals. So in this vibrant dance I mentioned, Chow, it was a male dance. But as the dance got popular, the girls said, why can't we dance? Because society has changed. That original restriction of mobility is not there. So girls started dancing Chow, and now there are at least 20 groups of such Chow dancers in the district called Purulia. Now, there was a film made on this because it was a very transformative change. And a girl called Maushumi, who was one of the first Chow girl dancers, she did the performances. And when the film was released and shown in television, she realized her name is not mentioned anywhere. So the attribution, the credit, and the consent, these are some of the other important elements. You know, we need to credit them, we need to give fair remuneration, and we need to ensure that when we use the recordings, we have the community's consent. So what they did, the communities, this is also part of the project High Pumps I mentioned, they worked amongst themselves and designed a code of ethics, and they negotiate with the stakeholders. So it is called like art codes, where they say, we want to perform, we want to be part of your projects, but please ensure we have a proper stage. Please ensure you value our time. Do not do last minute cancellations. Ensure that safety is there. Attribute us, mention our art form, mention our team, mention our film, our village, so that people come to know of us. So this is another important pillar of creative collaboration and exchange. Next, please. To summarize, transformative practice which creative collaborations brings about, we need to restore or ensure that community dignity is not hampered. There has to be a capacity building process to strengthen the agency. So the ecosystem has to be inclusive. This way, the process becomes regenerative, as I shared many examples, and that's how creative economy thrives. So contemporary art does not pose a challenge to traditional art. In fact, it can be a powerful ally. But what we need to avoid is extractive practice and honor rights, dignity, innovation by working together. Next, please. So in conclusion, what I'd like to share that let's carry on such creative collaboration across oceans, across seas, as Moe mentioned. And it is very important in today's world, which is rift with conflict, which is rift with discrimination. I think art can be that powerful voice. And without replacing traditional ecosystems, creative collaborations can offer new stages, new audiences, new markets, and shape new stories. And it can become a powerful voice of advocacy. So we need to go beyond tourism, nationalism, and such constraints which typically guide our work in performing art. But we need to really take it to a different scale to work for a future which celebrates diversity, celebrates pluralism, and brings visibility, digital footprint, and builds new networks supporting long-term safeguard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ananya, for your presentation. Okay, so before we continue to the next presentation session, let's enjoy a performance from Indonesia. Who's excited? Please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat box. Our performance is from Sanggar Kinara Kinari. Sanggar Kinara Kinari Borobudur, located about 1 kilometer from Borobudur Temple, is an arts collective engaged in dance, pedalangan, karawitan, wayang orang, and ketoprak. They have performed internationally, including at the 37th Borsang Umbrella Festival in Chiang Mai, and on a cultural mission to Australia, presenting the Borobudur relief dance and Indonesian culture. In this performance, under the choreography of Eko Sunyoto, they will present the Kinara Kinari dance, inspired by the decorative reliefs of Pawon Temple, a Buddhist temple which is also part of Borobudur Temple compounds, one of the UNESCO's World Heritage Site in Indonesia. The work portrays mythical beings, half human, half bird, who serve as celestial artists guarding the tree of life, or Kalpataru, alongside Apsaras, symbolizing the preservation of harmony and balance within the natural universe. Let's welcome Sanggar Kinara Kinari Borobudur. Wow, thank you so much for the amazing performance, Kinara Kinari. Now, before we move to the next session, let us take a group photo together. So it would be nice if everybody could turn your cameras on so we can see each other and take a group picture. Okay, let's take a group photo together. 3, 2, 1, say cheese. Okay, next slide. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay, next slide. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Yes. Okay, next slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay. We have another slide. Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next slide. 3, 2, 1. Say cheese. Okay, we have another slide. 3, 2, 1. Yep. Next slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay, last slide. 3, 2, 1. Give our biggest cheese. Okay, sweet. So now we'll move on to the next session featuring presentations from our 3 speakers from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. Each speaker will present for about 30 minutes, and I will be introducing them one by one before each presentation begins. Our first speaker from Indonesia, Heli Minarti, PhD. Heli Minarti is Yogyakarta-based independent curator or dramaturg of contemporary performance within the context of Asia, Oceania. She seeks to align her politics practice by rethinking radical strategies, connecting with theories grounded in the experiential historical. Applying curating as research, one of her core interests is looking at the historiographies of choreography as discursive practice vis-a-vis the eclectic knowledge infusing the understanding of human body, consciousness, and nature. She has co-curated, facilitated various festivals platforms. Her signature projects include Jejak, Tabi Exchange, Wandering Asian Contemporary Performance 2018-2021 in 4 cities, The Sea Within, the first edition of Cruising Curator Residency of Taipei Arts Festival. Okay. Okay, hello, Miss Heli. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I hope you too, I trust.
Nice. We'll start with your presentation. The stage is yours.
Yes, thank you, Nessa. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to UNESCO, here represented by Ms. Moe Chiba and its regional partners for inviting me to share my 2 cents on the offered subject. Since my practice is rooted within the context of contemporary performance, especially contemporary dance, here I choose to respond to a particular question or concern within the larger theme here, which is how can contemporary artists engage with traditional performing arts as sources of creative inspiration, rather than as materials to be appropriated or reproduced. Hence the title, Traces, Trails, and a Presence, Notion of Tradition in Indonesia Contemporary Dance. Kindly allow me to start. Within Indonesia contemporary dance scene, there has been this conundrum. Ellie, please, next slide. Within Indonesia contemporary dance scene, there has been this conundrum around the notion of tradition and traditional. Both words are often conflated, being used interchangeably, and not seldom, their meanings are reduced to superficial, in which tradition is referred to something enduring from the past, something perceived and changing, and in many cases, for the sake of identity, it is something that should be preserved. The other traditional often connotes to or conjures an image of a dance with certain traits of pre-modern times, although this is oftentimes debatable, and it signifies with visual elements the costume, the movements, and its rhythm. This is actually a myth creating. For instance, many dances labeled as traditional dance are actually a creation of not so long ago. In this case, the traditional is something of invention, perhaps more or less in the fashion of what the historian Eric Hobsbawm describes as reinvention of tradition. Within this conundrum, the tradition is easily elided. However, if we return to its etymology, the word tradition is rooted in the Latin word traditio, or transmission, with its verb tradure. Sorry, it's, yeah. Okay, within this conundrum, the tradition easily elided. However, if we return to its etymology, the word tradition is rooted in the Latin word traditio, or transmission, with its verb tradure, which means to hand over or to transmit. It suggests that the process is important, which is how a dance, as a shared living practice of a community being handed over from one generation to the next, often comes in as rituals, be it religious, spiritual, or social, in the context of a community who uphold it as long as it is relevant with their shared lives. The problem is when we believe that tradition, although it can change and continue, does so without ruptures, thus denying modernity as an influential agent. True that changes are the constant element in life, but Western modernity, through colonialism and capitalism, precipitates and complicates the process, taking the form of ruptures that punctured our local traditions all the time. Dance is not excluded from this cultural and historical process. Next. My senior in dance scholarship, the late Professor Sudarsono, coined the term kreasi baru, or new creation, referring to new dances that are based on some local tradition. Over time, quote unquote, over time, kreasi baru became a new genre. It refers to dances created out of the ritual context, but bearing some interpretation about what traditional look like, so much about visuality, such as the costume. They are now arguably pervasive within the dance scene here. One example could be this dance, described by the dancers themselves in this dance as a dance from Papua, quote unquote, performed at the outdoor stage of Indonesian Pavilion at this year's expo in Osaka. It was revealed in another video by a vlogger that the dancers originate from Jakarta. It was not clear which Papuan tribe this dance comes from. Almost certain it is out of nowhere. Even the accompanying song, Yamko Rambe Yamko, which for many decades was widely perceived as a folk song from Papua, even I could sing it on top of my head, was problematized 5 years ago as one Papuan account on Twitter questions which Papuan tribal language it is. Nobody in Papua, they claim, understand the meaning. It created such a brouhaha, a controversy and public debate as to its origin. Some claim it was sung for the first time by a band in Jakarta that was later brought to Papua. Very strange, huh? Others claim that it was sung through a tribal game involving calling out for ancestor spirit. Isn't that, sensitive? Another claim it as a song for a war dance. To my limited knowledge, the controversy around this song has not been resolved until now. Next. It doesn't mean that a ritual dance rooted in certain tradition doesn't exist anymore. It is still everywhere in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, larger Asia like India, that we learned before, if one looks at the right places. However, even the long-lasting one faces quite a challenge in the 21st century. One of them, for example, is Bedoyo Ketawang, one of my favorite, the most beautiful dance that I ever seen. A sacred court dance claimed to be performed every year for the last 200 years, excluding the 5 years from 2017 to 2022 to certain circumstance, to commemorate the Sultan's coronation of the Surakarta court in Central Java. The dance symbolizes the union between the Sultan and its people and with the divine. From literature, it could be imagined that it used to be danced by young girls, virgins, who have gone through a long training within the compound of the court walls. This changed, of course, with adult women coming from all walks of life as the dancers now. They still have to go through ascetic training, such as performing Javanese fasting, but they can no longer devote their life to just training to be a Bedoyo dancer like in the past. Gusti Rajan Ajeng Kusmurtia, the aristocrat member in charge of training them, expressed that it is increasingly difficult to find women of the 21st century willing to commit to such rigorous training of such beautiful ritual and dance form. Next. Tradition is often said to be the main drive of Indonesia contemporary dance, since many, if not most, Indonesian dancers and choreographers are trained in one or more traditional dances. Some of these forms are now taught at the national dance academies. This is a way of teaching the form, already uprooting the process of transmission that I mentioned before. With this in mind, how tradition informs and inspires contemporary choreographers in Indonesia. Allow me to share 3 case studies from different generations. Next. The first one is Gumarang Sakti Dance Company. Here I wish to refer to them as community instead of a company, which in retrospect sounds more correct. Next. So founded by the late Gusmiati Suit on the left, center left, this community introduced a modern and later contemporary take on Minangkabau performance tradition, rooted in its rich styles of pencak silat and Minang matrilineal custom or adat. At its peak, I would say from the mid-90s to the passing of Gusmiati in 2001, I would argue it was known from this Gumarang Sakti dance style was known from the dynamic collaboration, or as a journalist described it, is a fiery collaboration between Gusmiati and her eldest son, Boy Sakti, which is in the central right. Next. Different in generation and personal trajectory, each choreographer has their own approach towards Minangkabau tradition. Gusmiati was deeply and thoroughly trained in pencak silat from the age of 4 or 5. In the classic transmission of Minangkabau tradition, which was handed over by her maternal uncle. Meanwhile, Boy was never trained in pencak silat or any other performance tradition of Minangkabau, although he was mostly surrounded by her mother's artistic community, and this atmosphere clearly also shaped his artistic. Artistically, both of them couldn't be more different. Although both often look at Minang culture critically, they did so through such different lenses. Minang identity was a huge subject for Gusmiati, deeming it as part and parcel of herself. Meanwhile, Boy once deliberately distanced himself from Minang bodily practice in his choreographic work, something unthinkable to do for Gusmiati. I mean, later on, Boy returned to the form, but there was a period when he moved away. Next. So here is a short clip of Balega, an early period of Gusmiati modern work, first time performed in the US, in America in 1991 through the Indonesian festival in the US. It's also a period when Gusmiati started involving Boy in her artistic process that lasted until 2001. The video is 2 minutes and 2.5 minutes. Enjoy. Thank you. Thank you. Next slide. The second case study is a much recent work in which I was involved as a dramaturg. Next slide. Titled Hutan or Forest. This work is a collaboration between Katja Engel, an artist dividing her time between Berlin and Yogyakarta, and Ari Ersandi, a young choreographer from Lampung. Next slide. Katja and Ari had collaborated in some works before, so this one came more naturally for them. Hutan is a durational, it's lasting 8 hours, sound installation with 3 dancers, during which the audience is free to come and go and free to position themselves among the dancers as they please. One of the 3 dancers is Ari, it's in the photo. The piece was inspired when Ari was living in Tenggarong of Southeast Kalimantan for 4 years and was profoundly moved after some visit to nearby forests. He invited Katja to explore, not planning anything up front. They later ended up recording the sound of the forest for 24 hours straight and decided to develop a work on it with this recording. The 8-hour length is broken down to represent the 24-hour cycle from dawn to dusk. Next. Entering the second year of process, they invited Cecilia Hangin, a young dancer of Soputan Dayak tribe, the indigenous people of Kalimantan from Long Penane Hamlet in Mahakam Hulu. Of the entire crew involved, including me, Cecilia is the only person whose life experience was really shaped by living surrounded by the forests in Kalimantan. It was very much her upbringing until she moved to the city to pursue higher education. Cecilia thus became so central in this piece, since she is the living archive, the source, the portal, and the bridge that connected us all to Hutan. In this piece, she revisits her childhood memories, such as watching her grandmother sitting in the veranda, how she positioned her body, or how the darkness of the night reminds her of the hunting time with the grandmother. Listening to the recording sound of Rungan Forest, as in the piece, takes her immediately to Hudok dance, a ritual Dayak dance central to the tribal tradition. However, Cecilia incorporates it carefully into the choreography. She incorporated in stages as the work develops for 3 different shows in 3 different spaces. Clearly transplanting the whole form into a different context of performance was clearly not an option. Only after weaving layered conversation with Katja and Ari throughout the process, many hours of trying out in studio, Cecilia finally developed an embodied sensibility on how to transport Hudok, first so subtle and gradual, into the new space, a black box of MMCA Seoul, their last performance to date last August in South Korea. Let's catch up some performance here. It's 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay. The third, we move to a third last case. Next. The third and last case studies is the Konjo project, an ongoing artistic research by choreographer Densil Lebang. Konjo are the people living in Bulukumba, South Sulawesi. Those populated the coastal area are known for their artsy craftsmanship in shipbuilding, with the signature sailing ship, the magnificent Pinisi. Meanwhile, those who populated the mountainous area, only an hour trip from the shoreline, are known as Kajang Amatoa, whom through Mountains, through their ancient custom and lifestyle, whom through their ancient custom and lifestyle are the guardians of the rainforest for centuries. Konjo, which means here and there, is described as one of the oldest tribes in the whole of Sulawesi Island. Although now based in Jakarta after being raised mostly by her Toraja mother of Central Sulawesi, which is totally different locality, Densil was born in Bulukumba and grew up in the southern part of the island until she completed high school. Her worldview is more or less shaped by this period of her life. Next. The idea of Konjo project was triggered by a short visit to her birth town, Bulukumba, 2 years ago, the first in 20 years. Since then, Densil created a series of 5 short impromptu performances as a way of artistic research, temporarily called them modules. The first one in Riau, as she joined a choreographer's platform. Then she worked with a dancer in studio back in Jakarta just to try out some different ideas. Later, she had a chance to create another one whilst being part of a curated platform Taipei last year at Indonesia, curated platform Taipei. This is my reading, I'm sorry. And last year at Indonesian Dance Festival also was a short experiment, and eventually just 12 days ago in Makassar, after traveling in the region with her 6 core collaborators, including me, working as a dramaturg. Next. In this last presentation, 12 days ago, Densil worked with 4 dancers and a scenographer to simply trace and explore the embodied experience during the 12-day memorable research trip. Dancers stepping onto stones refer to our experience of entering the protected Kajang village, in which we had to wear all black attire, like in the photos before, complete with a sarong they lent to us. Walking bare feet, navigating a footpath of stones and various sizes was not easy for us, the city dwellers. Once inside the village, we were only allowed to take pictures in front of the village hall. So there's no picture when we met with the head of the tribe, the Amatoa himself. The outcome? Land and water are replicated inside the studio of Rumata, an independent art center, on which the dancers recall their fresh experience of the research trip to Bulukumba. This was in Makassar. As long as I know her, Densil is fond of building physical structure in her work, be it scaffolding, man-made transparent tunnels, wood planks, ship-like structure made by objects found in the studio, etc., etc. Performers have to interact with all this structure, or in the last case, they had to interact with a replicated site. In her hands, the 2 striking traditions of Konjo people, of the shore and of the mountain, are explored through the nature each inhabits. She does not trust in completing a choreographic piece. Densil prefers to deepen the process of experiencing here and there instead, which is what the word Konjo also means. So this research is still continues. I would like to leave you all there with all these stories and images in the hope that these 3 case studies, Gumarang Sakti Dance Community, Cecilia Hangin in Hutan with Katya and Ari, and Densil Lebang, could illuminate the many ways of how choreographers approach the trails and the traces of certain tradition, which they choose to be a focal point in their work, and how through these trails and traces, the tradition, as in the living practice, remain a presence, albeit now in its transformative contemporary form. To close, I shall thank all of the artists mentioned here, and thanks to their collaborators all along for their generosity of sharing these stories and practices with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Helly, for your presentation. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box below or hold them for the Q&A session that we will have at the end of this talk. So it's time to move on to the next presentation by the next speaker from Malaysia, Joko Katas. Joko Katas is a renowned Malaysian actor, writer, director, and activist, and the co-founder and artistic director of the Instant Cafe Theatre Company, or ICT. Renowned for its bold political satire and socially conscious productions since 1989. Her regional collaborations span Singapore, Japan, India, Indonesia, and the Philippines, with groups like Wild Rice, Cake Theatre, and The Necessary Stage. Internationally, she has worked on Pulau Antara with Setagaya Public Theatre at Japan, Hotel Grand Asia, and was a Nippon Foundation API Fellow. Recent ICT projects under her direction include Edisi Banjir with Zalfian Fuzi and Kuah Janan, and then came Spring with Saleh Sepas and Parastu, and the development of Chai, House of Art and Ideas. In 2025, she launched What the Elders Left Us, a festival revisiting Malaysia's post-independence art scene, featuring conversations, performances, and reflections on legacy and identity. Hello, Ms. Jo, can you hear us clearly? Okay, we're still, we can't hear your voice. Let's maybe take a few seconds for the team to check.
Sorry, good morning.
Okay, hi. Yes,
Hi.
thank you so much for joining us today. It's time
Thank
for your
you.
presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me for this talk today. And really want to say how inspiring it is to listen to both Ananya and to Heli. And there's so many commonalities in what we want to talk about. I mean, Ananya is talking about ethical collaborations, organic collaborations, the need to take time. And of course, I think for me, the thing that really resonates is this idea of curiosity. I'm an artist, and I think for me, I'm always curious to meet other artists, whether they are traditional artists or contemporary artists. And I think I also appreciate what she said about art being transformative and not extractive. And also what Heli said about the inventions of tradition. So maybe we'll start, I'm going to talk a little bit about my theatre company, but also this idea of tradition by the idea of the elders and what the elders left us. Because I want to talk not just about form, but about philosophy. My background, in fact, is in politics and philosophy, but I went into art making later. So I guess I can't help but always think on, I can't think about things always except on philosophical terms. So I think the idea of curiosity, this is what they left us, curiosity and knowledge. But they also left us forms, but they left us the philosophy behind the forms. They left us the dramas, yes, but they also left us the dramaturgies. And I'm very interested in this idea of dramaturgies. Because I think there's many different kinds of ways of telling stories which have come to us from the West, but I think there are different dramaturgies that come to us from our region, from Southeast Asia and perhaps Asia as well. And I want to think about the traditional and contemporary artist, not as being two separate creatures, but rather two sets of creatures who have different kinds of knowledge. Because I think basically the artist is a thinker and an innovator, something that has been said already a lot this morning. And I want to think about why is it that contemporary artists are interested in the work of the traditional artists, and why the traditional artists might be interested in the work of the contemporary artist as well. I think about, for example, how sometimes people are a bit suspicious of this collaboration, and rightly so, because there has been times of exploitation. But I also want to think about the times when somebody from a traditional artist background wants to go and work with somebody from a non-traditional background, and what can happen. So for example, in the Second World War in Japan, post-Second World War, the Japanese no artist Hideo Kanze wanted to get involved in the very underground Angora theatre movement because he felt he wanted to use his no theatre to talk about the American occupation of Japan. He wanted to use traditional no theatre to talk about very contemporary things. But his family objected to this. And he was basically kicked out of the family. So please excuse me, everybody. I have a bit of a sore throat this morning, so excuse me while I cough sometimes. Next slide, please. So I want you to think about this idea of tradition, that we start with tradition because tradition has a lot of knowledge that we must also learn. But we don't end. The contemporary artist doesn't end with tradition. I want us to think today about what we mean by tradition, what we mean by the traditional performing arts, who decides on the shape and form of tradition, who decides on its evolution. And I think this is an important thing to think about when we think about intercultural and intracultural conflict about the ownership of tradition. And at what point does tradition stop innovating because cultural forces such as governments insist that they stay frozen, as I think was the term that Ananya used earlier. So in the attempts to play the role of preserver, protector, defender, do we, and by we I don't mean us in this room, but I mean perhaps the state, do we interfere with the artist's instinct to innovate? Do we interfere with their curiosity? Thank you. Next. So I'm interested, as I said today, in philosophy, not just form, because I feel the traditional performing arts has a lot to offer, not only in the way of form, but for me, more importantly, in the way of philosophy. It is a way of seeing, perceiving, and understanding of the invisible world that is also of value. And so I think I want to also question this idea of traditional and ask, do we mean by traditional, do we mean local? And if we mean local, at what point is what we think of as being local only what we see as being traditional, but is the local contemporary artist drawing on their traditions also just part of a local tradition? Next. And just thinking again regionally, that regionally we have had a very fluid history. Art and ideas have flowed fairly unhindered. Now, of course, there are questions of appropriation of form, performance aesthetics, and that sometimes has led to intercultural regional conflict, for example, over the use of something like wayang, where there has been conflicts on the internet between netizens as to who these art forms belong to. Next. So I think I want perhaps today to rethink the idea of cosmology, that as artists, we draw on our local and traditional philosophies, our dramaturgies, as well as our cosmologies to explain and anchor our work. Next. The reason why I'm interested in cosmologies or worldviews, and the reason why I'm interested in traditional work is my theatre company started off 36 years ago doing political satire. And I want to look at this idea of tradition in the work of my theatre company, which does political satire. Next. Because often I was told when we first started that political satire, bukan budaya kita, is not our culture. So I wanted to question this. Why was I being told that political satire is not our culture? And that's what kind of first got me very interested in the idea of tradition, the idea of, well, who am I? What's my identity? Why do I feel is right for me to, for example, make fun of government or to question authority? So I wanted to figure out, traditionally speaking, what is my tradition? And that is part of my culture and my local heritage. Next. And so, of course, I came to wayang kulit, or shadow puppetry. Next. Because shadow puppetry is all about a world which is at war, places which are in conflict. The big demons, the gods, the princes are all fighting. But left in the middle is the ordinary person. You can see him in the middle there. wondering what the big fight is about, and commenting on the wars that go on around him. Next. So for me, this is a very contemporary story. All around us, there are people at war, the gods, the demons, the princes, the tech bros, the Trumps, and then there's us. So for me, this felt like it was a world I could understand, the shadow world of Wayang Kulit, to understand who I felt I was inside this world. I felt like I was one of the small people trying to live in the midst of this kind of warring elite. Next. And of course, the wise fool is the ordinary citizen. It's you and me in the midst of all these warring rulers. And we asked, what stories do they tell? And I felt basically they told us the news, what was going on that day, yesterday, what might be happening in the future if things aren't changed. And I was always very interested in the idea of this common man. Next. And my question always was, who is telling the story? And I think, again, I was very interested in the philosophy of Wayang, because in Wayang, it is the story is important, of course, but the way of telling the story, which is the shadow world, that was also for me very interesting as a philosophy, that you don't believe what you see, but the shadows are trying to tell you something perhaps deeper, perhaps greater than just what is on the surface. Next. And I was very interested also in the idea of the dalang, whose job it is to tell all the stories fairly. But my question is, what does he mean? What does this mean to tell stories fairly? Next. And then, of course, my question is then, who pays the dalang? So this, again, is a very important conundrum for the artists today, because we may want to do things and say things, but we are at the mercy of funding, we're at the mercy of those who want us to make art in a particular kind of way. And sometimes maybe artists shift their art practice because we still need to make a living. And the question is about whether or not how the traditional artist is also affected by considerations of funding, and how the contemporary artist is also affected by this. Next. Next. I come back to the idea of the clowns. I've always loved the clowns in Wayang Kulit. In Malaysia, Pat Dogo, Pat Long are the ones who are most loved. And the dalang, I believe, no matter who pays him, will always tell the story of Pat Dogo and Pat Long, because they are the ones who are most close to him, to his heart, and therefore I think most close to the public, and therefore most close to all of us. Next. So my theatre company, I felt, had its heritage in Wayang Kulit, the idea of the clown, of the idea of Pat Dogo, Pat Long, trying to have a balancing act in politics, trying to speak truth to power, but having to be very careful about how to negotiate our relationship with power. Next. And it also made me think about how, therefore, storytelling, even political satire, is sacred, because we're trying to tell this big epic story. It's not the Mahabharata, it's not the Wayang, it's not the Ramayana, but it is our modern day sacred story about the struggle between good and evil, which is an ongoing story. And I think allowing me to see it as part of this heritage made me feel that I wasn't doing something that was merely a Western construct, as I had been told, but I was part of a sacred heritage of sacred storytelling, of speaking truth to power. Next. So these are just some images from some of the shows that we did. As you can see, it was always questioning the state. Next. Questioning those in authority, standing up against power, like the police. Next. So just some background. My theatre company actually started in 1989 after something called Operation Lala, where people were arrested, detained without trial, newspapers were shut down. There was a climate of fear. So in a way, our clown characters were the alternative to the newspapers, feeling we can speak in some small way not in a very major way, but in some small way, to people who were feeling afraid, people who were feeling they couldn't talk about things. And the clowns that we performed are clowns who said, it's okay, we can talk to each other without fear. And because we were being funny, it was very hard to arrest us, I think. Next. But still we were told, this is not Malaysian culture, ini bukan budaya kita. So again, I go back to tradition, think, well, what is my theatre? What is theatre to me? What is culture to me? Next. So again, this is one of the characters I play. I see him as a modern wayang, as a modern clown. And one way of making fun of politicians is by being them. Next. 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 And this is the idea that I feel is something I believe is also a philosophy that I think is part of the wayang philosophy, that is not just about laughter. Theatre that does not capture with laughter and tears the social and historical pulse, the drama of its people, the genuine color of the spiritual and natural landscape, has no right to call itself theatre, but also only a place of amusement. So for me, it's very clear that the traditional arts always sees its places in something sacred, that you're not just trying to make people laugh, you're trying to make them understand their place, and you're trying to console their tears as well. It's not just a place of amusement. Next. And that's why I think also in Malaysia, we have a tradition of Main Putri and theatre as healing. And I think, again, philosophically, I was very attracted to this idea that theatre is a place, or is that medium to heal people, not just amusement, but healing as well. Next. And that's why we felt it's very important to put onto the stage all those who we feel are also fellow healers. They may not be artists, but they are people trying to heal, whether they are gender activists or religious activists. So how can we then expand the idea of performance in contemporary times by drawing on this tradition of theatre on the stage being a place for healing, of coming together. So for example, in the tradition of Main Putri, the person in society who is sick is asked to come onto the stage for a performance to be done for them so that they are healed by, by the performer. Next. Also in the idea of Mat Yong, philosophically, I thought this was something of great interest to me, that the heroes in Mat Yong are the princes and they are played by women, whereas the men play the clowns. And again, this upside down version of what reality is, again, made me feel, well, surely then we should use this as an idea of expressing what we think of as being contemporary ideas of feminism. Whereas in fact, this contemporary ideas of feminism is an idea which is very embedded in traditional art forms as well. To say it is very important to give space to the strength of women, to give space to the women as those driving the story, and that men in these instances play the role of clown. And I think this is important, again, when increasingly perhaps women are being told that their role in society should be something lesser, and that these are traditional roles. So I think we can also think of the performing arts as a place which asserts that traditional roles that we are now being told are traditional roles, perhaps are not tradition, but what perhaps the patriarchy wants us to believe is tradition. Next. So for example, this is a character I play where, again, you can be a beauty queen, but you can be smart. So this beauty queen, for example, appears in a lot of public appearances, public shows talking about politics. Next. The civil servant, another character I play, who is, again, usually a humble civil servant who's told her opinion doesn't matter, here is given a TED Talk. Next. This is another character that I play where, again, I'm a minority character who can never be prime minister in Malaysia, but here on a public platform, she says she will contest and run for prime minister. Next. Whereas this character that I play, who is a politician, who usually in Malaysia is treated with a lot of respect, he's treated here like a clown. And again, I feel when people say this is not Malaysian culture, this is bukan budaya kita, I go back to the idea of the wayang characters and say, no, in wayang, we make fun of those in power. We question those in power. That is the tradition of that art form. Next. So I'm very interested in the cosmology of the shadow world, imagining what is not. Next. So maybe in the world of this character, maybe one day she can become Prime Minister of Malaysia, because this is what you must put into the imagination of your audience. Next. And I asked the question, what did the laughter do when people came to watch a wayang performance or a contemporary comedy performance? I think it creates a sense of freedom that you can laugh at those in power. Next. And these are my inspirations from tradition. Political satire, I think, comes from tradition, critical thinking, subversions, inclusiveness. We use the weapons of the weak, and we believe in freedom of expression. Next. But yes, let's talk about appropriation of form, because I think this is something which everyone here is concerned about. And of course, it does happen that often traditions are not respected in terms of its philosophy, but rather people just want to appropriate its form. Next. So for example, this is something which happened in Malaysia recently, where a design firm was appropriated the masks of the Mahmeri tribe and faced a backlash, understandably, for this use. But for me, it's again a very interesting thing. If this conflict had not arisen, a lot of people would not have heard about the Mahmeri tribe. I'm not saying that it was right for him to use their mask without permission or in the appropriate way. But sometimes when people see something that they find very compelling or beautiful, we understand why they want to go there. They may not think even that they are appropriating it. They just may think, oh, this is a beautiful form, I want to use it. But these are all then, these become, I think, good opportunities for us to then discuss more the meaning of these traditions. Next. And of course, some people use these traditions a completely different way. This is a performance done by a group who worked for many years with the Mahmeri people to create a performance and a parade. So here's a very different relationship, a relationship based on curiosity and also transformation and not extraction. Next. And another one. So the Mahmeri have been working more and more with contemporary performers in Kuala Lumpur to create their work. In this piece, for example, the Mahmeri took their traditional masks, but they told a contemporary story about, for example, deforestation, plantations coming into their areas and deforesting their traditional lands and their anger against those plantation owners. Next. But we also have, on the other hand, cases such as this. So a few months ago, some people who were performing a kuda kepang ritual were arrested. And they were told, well, ini bukan budaya kita as well. So again, a lot of people are being told that certain art forms are not our art forms. I think this is something which I, again, want us to think about. The criticism towards this group of young kuda kepang performers was that you're using elements which are non-Islamic. But other people also said, well, this art form is from Java, so it's not really Malaysian, so you're using a foreign art form. And again, I want to go back to the idea of the fluidity of our borders, the fluidity of our world, that at what point does somebody decide kuda kepang is not a Malaysian art form when the people who practice it have been living in Malaysia for hundreds of years at a time when borders were extremely fluid. Next. So again, I have the question, who decides our traditions? And again, what happened with this same incident where the kuda kepang was seen as un-Islamic, and the idea is now that if you want to perform this, you must remove certain elements. So again, when traditions are told that you can perform your tradition, but you must remove the things that are part of its cosmology, what happens to the tradition? what happens to traditions when it can no longer perform based on its own philosophies. And perhaps this is when it becomes useful to the state as a form to interest tourists, but it may lose its own heart and soul because it can no longer connect to what makes it make sense to the performer. Next. So I did a festival last month called What the Elders Left Us, because I was interested in this very subject. Next. And this is a photo of two of the collaborators in the production. Pat Dane is a wayang kulit master from Kelantan. His collaborator, Tin Toy Chua, is a graphic designer from KL. They met some years ago and decided to form a company called Wayang Fusion. This is because Pat Dane felt that young people were not interested anymore in his stories of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. So he met up with Tin Toy, and they ended up having a long and interesting relationship. And they've been collaborating now for many years on a fusion wayang kulit. Next. So you can see here, one of the stories he tells is the stories using Star Wars figures. That's Darth Vader and Stormtrooper. Next. Next. That's Princess Leia. Next. And after the performance, we had a lot of discussion. And for me, this is the most important part of any kind of collaboration with traditional artists, is trying to understand their worldview. And somebody asked Pat Dane, how come in your performance you're using Bahasa Malaysia? Why don't you use Bahasa Kelantan? Because that's your traditional language. And he said, well, I'm using Bahasa Malaysia because I want more people to understand what I'm saying. If I speak Bahasa Kelantan, not many people will understand. But we asked him, would you mind performing some part in Bahasa Kelantan? Because we would like to understand the feeling that you have in your voice when you speak Bahasa Kelantan, even if you can't understand the meaning. And he told us, well, actually, when I perform wayang, I don't even speak Bahasa Kelantan. I speak Bahasa Wayang. And Bahasa Wayang is a completely different language altogether again. And then he
Ms.
did
Jo,
perform. Yes?
Just a quick reminder, you have 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. That he talked about the fact that Bahasa Wayang is a deeper spiritual language that he uses to communicate the stories he wants to communicate. And for me, this was something I didn't know. Even though I've been to Kelantan many times to listen to the wayang kulit there, I didn't understand how he was actually speaking a language that wasn't just Bahasa Kulit, but Bahasa Melayu or Bahasa Kelantan, but a different language called Bahasa Wayang. Next. And I want to maybe, since I don't have that much time left, maybe I'll just end with this slide. I want to talk about a performance I did in Setagaya Public Theatre many years ago called Pula Antara. And in deciding on the set design for the play, the set designer, myself, and the costume designer, who was Malaysian, the set designer was Japanese, we were thinking about what is it to have a forest, an ancient forest filled with many ghosts. And we came up with this idea of having a forest made up of wayang kulit figures. And this is where there was some intercultural conflict. The conflict here was between myself and the set designer with some of the actors who felt that to use something like this that was not from my culture, that is not Indian culture, was inappropriate and was wrong. And I was told, well, this is cultural appropriation. And I was very surprised by this because I'd always thought of myself as being Malaysian, and that therefore, which is an art form which I have studied and which I enjoy and which I love, was suddenly told to me, well, this is not yours because you are not Malay. So I want to end with this. Perhaps I do have a few more thoughts in my presentation, but I'm running out of time. But I want to think and us to think about this idea of what happens when you are excluded from an art form that you feel actually is part of your tradition, is part of your culture, and how can we be more open in allowing people to understand and embrace each other, and how can we work across traditions to have a relationship between artists in a way that is what's the word? Curious and respectful. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Can I just do one thing? I will end with one thing. Perhaps you could just play the second video, because I just want to bring in Borneo, and I just wanted to show a small video of somebody else who, his name is T. Bagak, who came from, he's from Sarawak, and he is a contemporary, not a performer, he's a contemporary artist. And when we talked about tradition, he said to me, as a Sarawakian and as an Iban, he said, my ancestors don't live here anymore, but I do. So let's just listen to this short video by T. Bagak.
Back when our own people said, oh, funny, why you put an aeroplane on his body? But I was intrigued, you know, I said, hey, for the first time, there's some Dayak art that I can relate. I haven't seen an aeroplane, Malaysian airline system no more. I can relate, and it still looks Dayak lah, primitive, you know, black, work. So I begin to dig lah, what's the story of this guy? Then found out. This one is from, what do you call it, Flickr. I managed to trace back the original photo. So this Dayak man, he went to work in Brunei in the 70s. And he commemorated his first trip ever on an airplane with this tattoo. So what he's actually doing, he's actually practicing an old tradition, which is berjalai. Berjalai, if you direct translate to Malay, is berjalan, but the correct translation is merantau lah. This is a rite of passage where we leave the longhouse to explore the world and we pursue knowledge, wealth, wisdom. This journey, right? Your first tattoo is the bunga tarong. You guys know what's bunga tarong? One, the spiral. The one is to say that you're ready to go out of to the world. You're responsible now because this is where you carry your backpack. And then, besides that, whatever achievement you have, you can still put in your body. So for this guy, in the 70s, was probably born in the 50s, I guess. To him, this one is a very big moment. Maybe for his, remember, this is back in the 70s, very backwards. For him, it's a very big moment. Maybe he's the first guy to fly an aeroplane in his rumah panjang. So that's why he gets his tattoo done. For him, it's a big achievement lah. Right? For us, it's biasa je. Right? Kapal terbang, the only souvenir we get is the barf bag. That's why. Right? Don't know why.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to leave this idea from T. Baga about, again, the traditional tattoo for berjalai is to show that you've left to go on a journey. But he found that this particular Iban had done a tattoo of an aeroplane, and that was his. He said for him it's the same thing, because now to berjalai you don't just take a boat, you don't just walk. Now you take an airplane. So now his berjalai tattoo is an aeroplane.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jo, for the very thought-provoking presentation. We'll move to our next presenter from Singapore. So, Dr. Noramin Farid. Dr. Noramin Farid Sultari is a Singaporean choreographer, arts educator, and scholar activist currently serving as senior lecturer in dance at Universiti Malaya, Guarkigen, and Ruai Collectives, how minoritized Southeast Asian dance practices advance decolonial knowledge, cultural sustainability, and social transformation. A recipient of the ASEAN India Youth Award 2018, Singapore Youth Award 2017, and Goh Chok Tong Mendaki Youth Promise Award 2016. He co-founded Dian Dancers, Arkigen, and Ruai Collective, leading intergenerational and cross-border initiatives that empower youth, women, and indigenous practitioners through performance, education, and community-based cultural advocacy across the region. Hello, Dr. Noramin, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. The time is yours.
Sure, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here today. I'm very excited to be sharing about my work, and also would like to also say thank you to my fellow panelists who have given such insightful perspectives on India, Indonesia, and also Malaysia. I'm very enriched by their sharing. And also for this perspective, I'm also coming from my own practice as a activist scholar. Okay, so so the slides. Okay, good. So my work takes place across Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, where I explore how dance functions as a form of cultural knowledge, intergenerational transmission, and community connection. And today I'm sharing choreo curating as a methodology, activating heritage through education and activism. This is a methodology that I'm still refining, and it's something that I do in reflection of the kinds of work that I've done, as an artist. And I will also share about how I operate choreo curation through 6 selected projects, which will be accompanied by short video excerpts. So this will be in the very final parts of my presentation. Next slide, please. So this is important, asking my positionality and why this matters, right? My perspective is shaped by the cultural diversity of maritime Southeast Asia, right? Which includes all 3 countries. And although I'm Singaporean, my artistic life has always moved fluidly across these 3 countries. And these are the places where I have trained, collaborated, and learned from communities whose dance tradition share deep historical and cultural resonances. And working across these borders naturally complicates tidy narratives of nation statehood. And it reveals how connected our artistic worlds are. And through shaped rhythms, related movement vocabularies, intertwined histories of trade and migration, and long-standing cultural affinities that extend beyond political boundaries. Very much things which Joe has also highlighted just now. These lived experiences shape choreo curation, right? As a way of working with heritage through collaboration, mobility, and deep cultural context, always attentive to the communities and environments that sustain these practices. Next slide, please. So what is choreo curating? You must be, questioning this term. It's such a pompous term, but no, it's not. It's quite humble, I think. So choreo curation, it brings together choreography, research, and curatorial thinking. And maybe to use Joe's words also, dramaturgy, right? It sees the body as an archive, carrying memory, technique, and cultural insight, and use performance as a way to activate that knowledge. So it emphasizes honoring lineage, supporting creative evolution, and creating reflective and culturally informed encounters, right? So it is very much an activist strategy. We might feel a little discomfort by the word activist, right? Because it might be, political. But I see every art form to be political. Everything that we do to be operating within the field of politics, even if we do not intend to make it very political, right? And the body as archive is something that we should honor because of the training that dancers, choreographers have undergone to discipline their bodies, right? And here I've mentioned about research. It's so important that we do not just do something without honoring the people who have done it before us, or at the very least understand the context of why these forms exist, right? And this is also something Ananya has also brought up as well about, the challenging extractive, right? Sometimes there will be people who just take and not understand the context of certain things and why they exist, and probably, it might be sacred to a certain group of people, and so these are things which we must consider ethically, right, before we move on. So part of choreo curation is that. Next, please. Next slide. Yes. Okay, so why choreo curating? Simple. Heritage is not static archive. This is something also Mo has talked about, the museumification, right? Heritage is not a static archive. And I personally see heritage is choreography, right? And why is this so? Because it is heritage is constantly moving. And if we understand it as tradition, it has always evolved through exchange and adaptation. Rather than seeing heritage as static, choreo curation treats it as something lived, something that continues to grow through practice, dialogue, and creativity. Right? So my practice is as a Malay dancer. I've been a Malay dancer all my life. And I've also inherited other forms as I went on to the many parts of Southeast Asia to learn. And learning it respectfully, understanding to what extent should we innovate. These are things which it's not easy. I also want to say that for any artist, it takes us a lot to just want to look at something and want to use it. There's a lot of ethical considerations that we undertake in order to use this for the things that we want to create. Yeah. So choreo creating is a methodology, is a way of activating heritage, and is a political stance, right? The political stance might not be anti-government. The political stance might be knowing where you stand with regards to heritage and its evolution. Okay. Next, please. So heritage and creativity. Now, Southeast Asian traditional dance forms, and we have heard this from Heli as well, right? Carry complex systems of movement knowledge shaped by environment, ritual, social life, and inter-community interaction. And from this perspective, creativity is not departure, it is continuation. Artistic innovation can emerge from traditional foundations when approached with understanding and care. And choreo curation supports this by encouraging artists to draw meaningfully from embodied histories while allowing new expressions to emerge. And Baheli, thank you so much for sharing about the intergenerational efforts that we're seeing right now with Indonesian contemporary dance. And you have also highlighted new names which I've not known, and I'm so interested to know. So well done in the forefront of Indonesian arts as well. So as I mentioned, movement vocabularies are knowledge, and repertoires as philosophies. Joe has mentioned this. Dance is way of life. Creativity equals to reactivation, not necessarily just modernization. Responsible innovation versus appropriation. So these are things that we grapple with as we work with heritage. Next. So I'm not only an artist, I'm also a scholar and educator. And part of it is also seeing how education is also activation. And in my teaching practice in University Malaya, education to me is not only about technique. So it's not only about teaching the technique. Students explore the cultural context behind movement, who practices it, why it developed, and how it has changed over time. Also, at the same time, is also to acknowledge what it does to their bodies and how they might understand, their moving bodies in relation to the world, right? I think we need to stop looking at dance or the traditional arts as just this passive, entertaining things. It is active. It's doing something. We need to acknowledge that something, right? And I encourage this through ethnographic assignments, making them reflect, collaborations with practitioners and community projects, and student experience heritage as a living practice. And this is also part of co-creation, right? It activates embodied knowledge, fosters responsible transmission, and cultivates artists who understand the cultural worlds behind their movements. Okay, and of course I've mentioned the intergenerational discourse. I feel this is important. I feel like because from my experience being part of the Malay dance scene in Singapore, we are very tightly knit. But sometimes we also tend to have our own little contestations with what is appropriate form. But I feel this a lot of what is appropriate or not is requires discourse, conversations. Intergenerational discourse is so important so that we acknowledge each other's presence. We acknowledge why young people are so eager to do crazy things. But also at the same time, by listening into the veterans, we also acknowledge, you had to do what you had to do because of the circumstances that you're living in as well. So this empathetic listening is so important. And co-creation, I'm for this, and this is also something that I will highlight later in regional collaborations. And yeah, to understand context, acknowledge the lineage, and accountability. Next, please. So for regional cooperation, we in Maritime and Southeast Asia has long been connected by movement across borders. Our dance forms share affinities, but also retain local distinctiveness, right? Recognizing these shared heritages opens possibilities for collaboration. We acknowledge the intertwined histories, right? We also acknowledge the shared repertoires and distinct local identities. We cannot run away and from the fact that the Javanese diaspora is wide, right? And the fact that we do have Javanese people who identify as Malaysian and have continued Javanese forms, you see, and the we also must acknowledge that some of these unwarranted cultural misunderstandings within countries is it should be understood through how connected we are. And it's very difficult to look at Facebook comments and social media comments where people are like, oh, this is ours and this is not theirs. It's very sad. It's very sad. It also shows that there is very little cultural literacy. And if we allow nationalistic pride to close our eyes to how connected we are, we lose the fact that we are Maritime Southeast Asia. And I have to say that as a scholar, it's very disheartening each time to read such comments which doesn't acknowledge that we are like this. You know, these hands. Yeah. So yeah, that's my okay, collaboration over competition, mutual accountability and ethical exchange. Okay, next please. Next slide. Thank you. So just to, in a nutshell, we can show models of collaborative work, co-teaching, shared curricula, joint documentation and community archives, cultural dance exchange labs, digital platforms for shared access. These are some ideas that I would like to propose. So now, to the next slide, please. I would like to show case studies through my own work as an scholar activist. Next slide. Okay, and I want to show how curation can support cultural sustainability. Here, activism means nurturing traditions that may be overlooked, providing space for communities to share stories, supporting intergenerational continuity, and enabling culturally grounded creativity. So with this in mind, I'll move into my 6 examples. Next slide. Okay, so this is actually a video. Don't play the video first, but let me just say that this is a work called Twine, and this was presented as part of National Arts Council. Hello, NEC, I know you're here. National Arts Council's Arts in Your Neighborhood, where we actually brought, which I actually initiated and facilitated this where Malay, Indian, and Chinese traditional training comes together in this space in Chongpang, which is a public space, and I wanted to show how our body archives can exist. Also, at the same time, we were doing the task of intertwining ourselves with this yarn. Okay, so please show the video. Thank you.
On our, I like the satay. Satay very nice. So that's all. Nó có tiền lại rồi. Ở đó mình xem.
Okay, thanks. So I'm also taking note that I might, yeah, because of time, so I don't need to show the whole video. So the next one is called Po, which is wait, sorry. The next one is a performance lecture called Intersections, Traditionally Speaking, and this is a work where as a traditional Malay traditional dancer, I felt that I was always working in my silo, which is traditional Malay dance. And I really wanted to understand my friends from another traditional dance form. So Intersections, Traditionally Speaking, brought together myself and my soulmate, Elizabeth Chan, who is a Chinese dancer. And we got ourselves to do a performance lecture where we dialogue. Okay, so the video, please. When it's a female performer, what is prized is the hips, yeah? Is the swaying of the hips. So we have the Malay gait, K-G-A-I-T, Malay gait, right? So it's that swaying motion, right? Like don't is to relax the hip and allowing it to move naturally. I think because you are dressed in a traditional manner and you are still adhering to certain traditional decorums, right? And it's just that moment in time where you're exploring.
So that exploration and innovation becomes part of the traditional form, lah.
Yes.
I see, because I'm just thinking of it because there's like almost a direct kind of example in Chinese
Thank you. I'm sorry if you saw me laughing because it's been a while when as I watched these videos and yeah, I'm reflecting upon those moments. Okay, so as you can see, performance lecture was one of the formats in which I felt could best be choreo-curated to give the experience of how I activate heritage. Another performance lecture that I would like to share is called Po. And this is a performance lecture that allowed me to reflect autobiographically on my Malay dance training, examining technique, discipline, and the embodied experience of learning. And by combining performance with explanation, actually Po opens a space for audiences to better understand the processes behind traditional forms. So the video, please.
This is a picture of a row of dancing girls, joget girls, waiting for their male patrons to dance with them. So what happens here is male patrons would buy tickets and they would approach one of these ladies to dance, and they would dance for a duration of the ronggeng repertoire. The Malay dance that is performed today are inspired by the art dancers of the golden era of Malay language film. For those who might not know where the Malay world is, it is part of maritime Southeast Asia in which Singapore is part of. It is connected through history, common language, customs and traditions. Communities of people who do identify with this ethnic identity are now living in modern nation states such as Malaysia, Indonesia. There seems to be a tendency to talk about Indonesia as part of a homogenized place, but in fact, there are Malay communities living in some parts of Sumatra and Borneo. Also in Brunei Darussalam, southern Philippines, and southern Thailand. As a dance anthropologist, I have had the privilege of visiting some of these communities. I have learned that there is a variety of linggang across the Nusantara. Depending on the land that you live on, people walk differently.
Thank you. The next one is called Mak Mak Menari, which was a documentary theatre work that I did in relationship with my sisters from the Malay dance scene. These are a group of mothers or women, as in older women, who were my seniors in Malay dance, and they actually started their own Malay dance group so that they can continue dancing in a space where they feel comfortable. And I was so inspired by them that I co-directed this work with my friend Grace Lee Koo, and we wanted to highlight the voices of these women. The video, please.
I miss dancing actually. So 2012, if I'm not mistaken, our senior dancers are still in contact. So we met Kak Mas because she's still active in Atrika. So we went to her performance actually. And from there, we were teasing each other lah. We were talking to each other, the girls, Yad, Linda and all, Katlin all. So we were saying like, wait, why not we put up a performance.
Dancing with them made me feel connected. Little did we know that would be the last time we all dance together.
There's always the two sides, right? One side would be very supportive, like admiration, like, wow, she can juggle. You know, she can juggle being a mom, she can juggle being a career woman, and she can still fit in with this dancing thing. Again, like, what difference does it make, like, if I go to a yoga class?
Okay. Another effort I did under this group collective, which I started with my friends in Singapore, was ARKIGEN. We were very inspired by the good work of Professor Muhammad Anis Muhammad Noor, who's my mentor in Malaysia, who has revived Ronggeng in Malaysia, and wanted to see whether this is a conversation that we can have also in Singapore. So with ARKIGEN, we initiated Ronggeng Revival, and it was a project that needed ground sensing. This was supported by National Arts Council. And the ground sensing work needed to be done because of the taboos related to the term Ronggeng and the form. So it was necessary, as a person who is from the scene, goes down to the ground, have conversations with veterans, musicians, and also my peers, to ask what are their feelings about this. So it was a good initiative. However, this is we have yet to do anything more about it afterwards, because life has taken us to many different directions. But I just wanted to show you that such initiatives exist, and it requires a consensus from the community. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this one is more of the work that I'm doing with technology and with my long-time collaborator, James Lai. So it's how we use technology with traditional arts. This is a 10-year, not 10-year project, but 10-year endeavor. Starting in 2014, you see a very young me later. And then moving on with support from the National Arts Council in 2022 and 2024, trying to see how we can turn what we were experimenting with in 2014 into something more wearable. So you will see that we're wearing the technology on our bodies and trying to negotiate light and sound. So this is something that I would like to show you.
Basically, I wanted to do a multidisciplinary production showcasing music technology, the sonic arts. I've met Amin previously when I did an installation at the substation called Power to the. It was device driven as well, but in that particular instance, we had a surround setup where visitors would be able to use the device to create music on the spot. During the demonstration, I actually got Amin to do a little improvisation, and I thought like, wow, what would happen if you get them dancers or a group of dancers? So that was the idea for the first piece.
Sorry, are you able to move forward to the
It's true,
2
the
minutes?
post-COVID
Yes.
experience is legit. It does feel like I'm feeling it now. But what solo performance and the possibility of the body having that agency to control other elements, to be honest, was very empowering and allowed me to work within, to some extent, my limitations as an aging dancer, to see what more can be done and how I can challenge my capacity. That was the most challenging, yet I find it to be most beneficial.
Okay, thank you. You can stop this video. I just have one more video to show. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, the last one that I want to show is how I've collaborated with friends in Malaysia. So we started ROI Collective, which was a collective of Sarawakian and non-Sarawakian artists, right? And Ibanscapes was something that I produced with last year, and it was a way to bring to reveal different Iban dance forms, because the problem in Malaysia as well, we only see one version of Iban, but actually there's a diversity, right? So let me just play the video. Thank you. So I would just like to say that the last, for Ibanscapes, the contemporary pieces were also choreographed by my Sarawakian friends, Andrew Igai Jamo, Muhammad Hafzal Aziz, Ramles Suradi Anak Suradi, Albert Sigan Anak Saliman. And I wanted to show the diversity of Ajat and how they have used those Ajat forms to create their contemporary works. So that was also part of the production. So in a nutshell, I would say that heritage strives through activation, through movement, reflection, and collaboration. And choreo curation offers the way to support this activation by honoring tradition, performances, research, and care, strengthening the sustainability of our cultural ecosystems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Naramin. So before we begin the Q&A session, we'll have a short co-creation sharing session for about 15 minutes. So for the art practitioners who have previously created or participated in a co-creation project, we would love to hear your experiences. Maybe we can start with one person from Indonesia, one from Singapore, one from Malaysia, and you can raise your hand, introduce yourself, and feel free to share. Maybe we will start with Ali Alasri from Malaysia.
Sorry. Hello. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi. No, thank you, fellow speakers. Oh no, why am I upside down? Wait, I think thank you so much everyone for this sort of sharing by Hadley, Joe, and Noramin. I think it was quite interesting to kind of get the breadth of how we could think of inheriting traditions at this day and age, especially at a very crazy time for Malaysia, for Southeast Asia as a whole, and to connect through tradition. Is it to connect in terms of practice? Is it to connect in terms of beliefs, or both? Right? Yeah, just give me a bit. I have to really work with this background. It's so weird. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, thank you so much for bringing us through a journey in everyone's work, actually, from hutan to Pulau Antara to even pop, from the environment to the body. And I wonder like how much of this criticality is inherited with other practitioners outside of Malaysia, even because I've worked with Korea and Philippines in a production, and of course, when Joe pointed out who's paying for it and who's telling that story, it was really heightened because Korea had the funds, and we had to perform to Korean audiences. So part of the performance vocabulary at that time wasn't so much in looking at traditions, but looking at the temperature of the nation, where Philippines was getting a new president, Malaysia was getting a new prime minister, and Korea was upset with their president. And from then on, we found commonalities in the idea of election, the ritual of every day of voting for a leader in a kind of Asian democracy as a performative act. So we performed as politicians. And what we discovered is that, yes, or despite going through a similar language, there's still a kind of cultural adaptation needed given the audience's presence. So part of performance required translation of languages from the audience to the performers who most spoke in English. So what it revealed, not only, a gap in looking at today's version of connectedness in practice, but also looking at how much we embody the language, which really highlights the ideologies we carry as people of a certain geography, right? So I hope I'm not going so much. I think I'm very, very inspired by this panel, and look forward to hear more co-sharing experiences from other practitioners who managed to witness to this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have about 12 minutes left for others who would like to share for the co-creation practice. Do we have anybody? You guys can raise your hand and then share your experiences. Okay. Okay, so should we move to the Q&A session then? Okay. Oh, okay. Now we'll go to Megatru from Indonesia.
Mungkin aku pakai bahasa Indonesia ya, dan bentar ini masih ada kumisnya ternyata. Oke, gak apa-apa deh, lanjut aja. Sorry. Salam kenal, aku Megatru Banyumili dan aku tinggal di Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Sebelumnya aku berterima kasih banget karena ada ruang yang disediakan oleh dari UNESCO ini, dan ternyata tidak hanya sekali saja tapi berulang kali dan sangat membantuku, dan programnya terus semakin dalam dan ini sudah keberapa ya, berarti ketiga yang aku jumpai program dari UNESCO yang kemudian bekerja sama dengan ARS Management. Aku berterima kasih banyak, dan aku sedikit bagaimana kemudian prosesku ini berjalan. Salah satunya, sejauh ini aku selalu kemudian tidak pernah bergerak sendiri dalam berkreasi. Selalu ada peran bersama yang kemudian menghidupkan setiap karya-karya yang baik itu karya personal ataupun karya bersama. Yang kemudian salah satunya yang kemudian sangat memorable bagiku adalah aku bersama dengan beberapa seniman di Indonesia itu setiap tanggal 17 Agustus itu selalu memproduksi sebuah karya, baik itu karyanya kita besar sempat mengenainya dalam bentuk virtual karena kemarin kita terkendala adanya corona. Karya ini sudah berjalan sejak tahun 2018 yang kita sebut programnya sebagai 1000 Cipta Satu Indonesia, di mana beberapa seniman di Indonesia itu bergabung menjadi satu untuk membuat satu karya yang kemudian menunjukkan, mengimplementasikan bagaimana perkembangan budaya yang kemudian diserap ke dalam tubuhnya masing-masing yang selama ini berjalan dalam konteks mencintai tentang Indonesia. Tentu saja banyak tantangan, terutama ketika Corona kemarin, yang ternyata saat perjumpaan dengan Corona itu justru memunculkan banyak peluang yang lebih besar lagi, di mana kita tidak lagi terbatas pada yang tadinya sebelumnya itu hanya regional di Jogja aja, tapi kemudian menjadi lebih regional di Jogja dan Jawa Tengah ya, kemudian lebih meluas lagi menjadi ke seluruh Indonesia. Dan aku membayangkan bagaimana apabila ini nantinya bisa berkembang menjadi lebih luas lagi, tidak hanya lingkup nasional aja, tapi juga bisa menjadi lingkup yang multinasional. Dan aku sangat berharap pada ruang ini untuk menjadi ruang-ruang berdiskusi kemudian untuk memunculkan kemungkinan-kemungkinan baru. Itu aja sih.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mega. Maybe I would translate very quickly into English. So Mega talked about how he used collective efforts, and that's something like very present in his personal and collective works in the co-creation project. And he also talked about COVID challenges and how it not only brought challenges but also opportunities to expand the reach, not only just regionally in Jogja, but then it widened it to Central Java and then Indonesia. And he really hoped that through this forum, that this project can even reach a bigger audience to spark international collaborations. Okay, Siti Nurfianti, I think you raised your hand. Yes, you can go ahead and share.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Saya akan ngomong dalam bahasa Indonesia saja ya, singkat saja. Setelah menyimak dari beberapa narasumber tadi dari Indonesia, dari Malaysia, dan dari Singapura, kalau boleh saya simpulkan bahwa yang ditampilkan mungkin di panggung global itu lebih pada bahwa bentuk tradisional itu sebagai sumber penciptaan ya, sehingga bentuk-bentuk yang dipertontonkan tadi adalah bentuk kontemporer dari tradisi kita. Nah, pertanyaannya adalah apakah kemudian bentuk-bentuk yang tradisional itu masih bisa untuk perform atau dipertontonkan atau dipertunjukkan di panggung global? Karena saya pribadi adalah saya mengelola sebuah sanggar seni yang memang membawa bentuk yang masih tradisional, yaitu topeng Malang yang berlokasi di Malang, di Desa Tumpang, yang dipimpin oleh Ki Soleh Hadi Pramono. Begitu. Kami ingin menyebarkan atau membawa topeng Malangan ini ke panggung global. Nah, akan tetapi dari apa yang dipaparkan oleh narasumber tadi, saya kok meng-highlight bahwa yang dipertontonkan itu adalah bentuk-bentuk kontemporer seperti karya Kak Densil begitu ya, itu kan bentuk karya kontemporer tadi. Nah, apakah memang tradisi ini harus dari bentuk tradisi ini yang diterima oleh masyarakat global itu adalah bentuk yang yang kontemporer? Nah, itu pertanyaan saya. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you, Siti. I think this is part of the Q&A, right? Do we still have time for co-creation sharing? Okay, so maybe we'll save this question for the Q&A session, and then if somebody would like to share during the co-creation process, you can share your experience. Okay, so since nobody shares their experience for the co-creation process, then we will get into the Q&A session. So maybe I'll translate Siti's question. So Siti asked, she saw that in the examples that have been provided earlier, that a lot of the things that are performed in the global stages, they position traditional as a source and a source of inspiration for other forms of performances, and notably what we call the contemporary performance is the output that uses the traditional as the source. So she asked, can the traditional be performed as it is in the global stage, considering that Siti is a performer of the Topeng Malangan performance, and she would like to know how this would be in the global stage. Maybe we will, okay, should we keep questions first, or maybe any of the speakers would like to respond?
From our experience, as I showcased, our traditional artists perform their dances, their traditions in global stage as it is. It's not that it is a contemporary rendition, but as I highlighted, that they need to be empowered to present it in a global stage, you know, for the technical aspects, capacity building is required. Because something you danced as part of your ode to nature, as part of marriage ceremony or rituals, you need to know how to present it to another kind of audience. But there is a lot of appreciation for traditional dance.
Okay, maybe I'll translate it back to Bahasa Indonesia to Siti. So, jadi tadi Ananya membicarakan tentang bagaimana itu sangat dimungkinkan dan itu terlihat dalam proyek Ananya sendiri, dan bagaimana di institusi Ananya ia juga memberikan training untuk para performer tradisional ini untuk tampil dalam panggung global. Okay, we have another question from Pupu Hadi Mulia from Indonesia. So she asked, may I ask the speaker, what do you learn from the traditional art products you've observed? This leads to the core question, what is art for today and for whom? I apologize if my question seems naive. I simply want to understand the shift in perspective experienced by the speaker. Thank you. Okay. Do you have any specific speaker in mind, Pupu? Or to... Okay, or to all four of them? Or maybe from the four speakers who would like to respond? Do you have a response from Pupu already? Okay.
Yes, bisa lagi nggak? Ulang soalan.
The question, yes. Yeah, so may I ask the speaker, what do you learn from the traditional art products you've observed? This leads to the core question, what is art for today and for whom?
Okay. The second question is, it's a very, I don't know, I find it a very difficult answer because it deals with, you know, the market. It also deals with the audience, the spectatorship, what's in trend. But I'll go back to the first one, the first question about the traditional forms that I have observed. I think the difference between observation and participant observation is that we participate in the learning of it rather than just merely observing. In the participation of the form of learning a new form, we understand the nuances of gesture, nuansa geraknya bagaimana, dan juga two languages, and then the context in which the dance is performed, right? And also the discipline in which the body has to be molded into a certain way in order to inherit the form, right? Of course, there are discussions within, you know, it's more disciplined in the classical form and not so disciplined in the folk form. Whatever it might be, the body goes through a transformation, right? So that's what I believe. Every time we learn a new dance form or the form that we choose to learn, we are transforming the body because it is moldable. And maybe to just answer Siti, Mbak Siti, jangan khawatir. Do not be worried because there will always be a market for folklore, for tradition. I think it's not about the fact that we were showing contemporary examples means that it is more fashionable or marketable. I think it's also about the kind of audience that what Ananya said, the kind of audiences who will appreciate your form, right? It doesn't mean that in order to go global, you need to meet contemporary demands. The fact that you choose a stance, a political stance to be traditional, means that you are proud of the form that you have, and it can grow, be it can be shared to the world, right? But I think what the examples we were showing, we just wanted to show how traditional can be reworked or can be presented differently. I'm also pengelola sanggar di Singapore, Tari Melayu, and still promoting the Malay dance form as a folkloric form as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nuramin. Maybe.
Can I add something to this question?
Yes, Ms. Jo.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The question about, what do you learn from the traditional art products that you have observed? And I agree with Amin that when you embody it, you learn it differently. And when you're learning it as practice, you learn it differently. But also that I think that to not be afraid of encounters, because I think every encounter that you have with any kind of tradition deepens your understanding of art making in general. So for myself, for example, when I had the opportunity to spend 6 months in Japan watching traditional Japanese art forms, I took back into my subconscious, maybe my consciousness, this idea of the relationship of the performer on stage, the performer off stage. So I created a piece after that where the performers on stage never spoke, that all the voices are coming from off stage. And because I was very interested when I was observing these traditional art pieces in Japan, where the story is being told not by the actor on stage, but by the orchestra of the singers off stage. And I think that, again, I go back to the idea of the artist being curious, the artist always wanting to learn from other artists and from other art forms. And I think that I'm very interested in the idea of hybridity, so that if, let's say, you become genuinely very interested in the way somebody creates something and you try to understand the context of it, and something tells you, well, actually, this can also speak to me and my context, that then you should experiment with that. You should start to see what that new discovery is going to give you. Sometimes we think that we're so careful sometimes. I mean, contemporary performers maybe can be overly cautious. And I always think it's not about, don't reject, always embrace and discover when you have the opportunity to have such encounters.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jo. Ms. Heli?
So I have to speak in English karena udah ada penerjemah. So it's just a quick response to the two fellow Indonesians who asked. So first, I would not say art products, but art practices. So I mean, because I observed for a long time the Gumarang Sakti dance community as a non-Minang. So I was a Jakartan. They were like Minang diaspora living in Jakarta. So having observed their practices, getting to know them up close, at the end I learned about myself more than through knowing, through getting to know, through learning about Minang cultures. And I think it's very important discovery. And the second one, Mbak Siti, global stage is very big and can be very abstract, can be very real. I would say it depends on spaces that one can enter. So I think the examples here are contemporary form that I gave you the examples, but I've been close to a particular community, Cipta Budaya community in Tutup Nisor, in not long from Muntilan. And once they were invited, I helped, how to say it, they were invited to perform one of their traditions, which is like Jatilan, to open the Macau Arts Festival. But that's, through communication, through conversation, like, spaces like Afrizal Mana say every spaces has a narrative. So you really have to understand the narrative of a space. The space here, which is like a context, like festival, yeah, I mean, I think based on YouTube, just a quick one, there are a lot of like festival that create a space for traditional art forms to kind of like meet and encounter each other. And I think, and also the global can also come to Malang, why not? Because I think that's what happens in Cipta Budaya. The last 2 years, for example, I come, I know one particular like rituals that they had. Then I come during that rituals to have this experience of the so-called original, experience of how to say it, watching and being part of performance, not really being part, really as watching as an audience member, but knowing that it's a ritual, it's connected to the community. So so it's the global can also come to your place, doesn't have to. So it goes both ways. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heli. Maybe Ms. Alanya, would you like to respond to the previous question?
I think it's answered.
Okay. Okay. We'll move to the next question then from Ali from Malaysia, from ERTI. To fellow speakers, what is urgent then for today's performing arts co-creation initiatives? What needs to be addressed and explored towards cultural diplomacy or integration? Where can we go? Any of the speakers would like to respond? What is urgent for today's performing arts?
I can say something.
Yes, go ahead, Jo.
I think that things haven't changed so much, Ali, in that what is urgent today is what's always been urgent, and that is to think of co-creation initiatives not as end products, and to think about time. So in the year 2000, when I did a co-creation with Setagaya Public Theatre in Japan, that led us to understand various pitfalls. And the biggest pitfall that we understood was when you don't give yourself enough time for process. Even though we thought we'd given ourselves 2 years, actually it wasn't really enough, because you need to not just create a product, you need to first understand the cultural context of each person. You have to understand you're working across languages. And you also need to understand there's not just intercultural, but intra-cultural differences, especially in a country like Malaysia, when we have so many different languages within one place. And I would say the same with Singapore, the same with Indonesia. We have intra-cultural differences too, and those must also be negotiated in trying to think of inter-regional co-creation initiatives. So I would say one is time, one is not to be product-oriented, but be process-oriented, to be aware of the power dynamics that come with funding, and to be able to speak openly about it. At the end of Pulantara, we then did a new production co-creation, which lasted 3 years, called Lohan Journey Asian Collaboration Project, because we knew that what we needed to discuss there was actually all these issues, so that we can then have more longer term co-productions and collaborations. I won't say anything more than that, but I think those are just very simply some of the things to think about. And then also maybe the idea of friendships. I was talking to somebody recently about art and friendship. And I do believe that when we approach art making and collaborations as friendship building, perhaps that's also a good way to move forward with empathy.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Jo. Considering the time, we have 4 more questions here. And I see that somebody raised their hand. Dwi Oktarini from Indonesia.
Hello, my name is Dwi. Sorry, I cannot open my camera because my signal is poor if I open my camera. Today, knowledge is very useful for me as a practitioner, researchers, and PhD students and lecturer of art performance education in Indonesia. Hello, everybody. And it's very interesting to discuss traditional culture, both intangible cultural heritage such as dance and ritual ceremonies of indigenous peoples in Indonesia. My question is my problem, honestly. How can our writing about the Indonesian context be accepted in such as international journal like Scopus or something? Because several times I have tried and found it quite difficult because the topic is considered too global. They said like that. The editor sometimes always said your context is so Indonesian or global, or you have the experience about it, and can I know this one? Even as we know, to art is soft diplomacy, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Dwi.
Okay, probably I'll answer as an academic. And this push for Scopus is a big thing also in Malaysia, not so much in Singapore. And I think the push for Scopus and World of Science or Web of Science is also trying to push our rankings for universities. So I have to say this, Dewey. I think you might need to choose the right kinds of journals and journals which value your voice. Because if you were to try to pander atau menukar mengikut arus sesebuah journal itu, if you're going to change according to the journal, then you might also lose the voice that you really want to bring across. So I think be mindful of the kind of journals that can support the kind of research that you want to do. Also at the same time, what might be lacking in some of the research is how can Indonesian case studies be made more global and relevant. Yeah, so that's my take on it in a nutshell. But you can, we can talk about this. But that's my feeling as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Amin. Okay, I think we have another question from Irama Tongko Teduh. Apa perimeternya kesenian dikatakan sebagai kesenian tradisional? Any of the speakers would like to respond to this one? Oh yeah, Mbak Heli?
I think I touched upon that within Indonesian context in the beginning of my presentation, Irama. It's actually questioning as well, like you said, but I don't know, in the beginning maybe there was a breakdown on my microphone, so it wasn't clear, but it was just an insight, what I called a conundrum within Indonesian context, especially contemporary dance. Like what is tradition and what is traditional, because it's always debatable. It's always, and I think what's important is to open the dialogue, but critical dialogue, not just like this and that, but bit full of insights coming from our own practices. So I don't know. I mean, you can contact ARS Management, and I can, and then they can pass it to me if it's really bothering you, this question. Thank you.
Yeah, this is such a big question that all four speakers in the panels try to answer to. Okay, we have a next question from Rusmianelli. So for the panelists, Ms. Heli, Ms. Jo, and Mr. Noramin, what kind of policies, support systems, or collaborations from government bodies would genuinely empower traditional performers? Thank you very much. Yeah, any of the speakers would like to respond?
I would like to respond.
Yes.
So I'm going to come from both a grassroots perspective and also from a government perspective. I am all for pushing for more grassroots perspectives and initiatives because I think my experience, especially living in Malaysia now, we don't really have like a national arts council like Singapore. So in Malaysia, I'm seeing a lot more grassroots initiatives coming from artists who believe in pushing for cultural policies, pushing for arts education, and I'm so inspired and galvanized by their efforts. So I'm just wary about for government systems to support. National Arts Council has gone a long way in Singapore. It has, and this is also part of my PhD, has gone a long way to become the entity that they are today. And a lot of listening, a lot of going down to the ground to listen to what artists think and believe is necessary so that they are able to create change through their arm, their instrument arm as a government agency. And I salute them now. Now I live overseas, so I see it differently. Not so much when I was living in Singapore, but I must say that they have gone through a lot, and a lot of conversations with artists was necessary. So if we want to create policies that impact artists and culture, we need to sit down with the artists and the cultural activists to listen clearly, and NEC has done a very wonderful job on that account. Okay, of course there are a lot of other things that we can work on, but that's a different thing. But in Malaysia, I am so inspired by the way the artists come together on their own accord, seeing that there's a missing thing on policy and cultural development, there's a missing part on arts education, and they want to do something about it. So I think galvanizing efforts on the ground is far more effective. Yeah, that's my take.
Okay, I think we have two more questions, right?
Can I add something to that?
Yes, go ahead, Jo.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, in that, in Malaysia, because we don't have governments coming in strongly enough, grassroots people tend to come up. But I do feel that if you ask what kind of policy support systems or collaborations from government bodies are needed, I would say, first of all, government bodies need to trust the performer, trust the traditional performer, not just exploit them to use them for tourism, and that they need to be much more on the grounds looking at what artists are trying to do rather than spending their time and their money creating rules. So there's a lot of rule making, but not much support. So for example, Pat Dane, whose image I showed you earlier, he's been trying for years just to get air conditioning in his room where he stores his puppets so they do not shred. But and so what's happening there is that grassroots support is coming, individual support is coming, but there's no government support for something as basic as just giving him an air-conditioned space so that the puppets can be preserved. Too much time spent in making rules instead.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Ms. Jo. Oh yeah, Maheli would like to add something?
I think I seconded Amin and Jo, for underlining the importance of listening to the grassroots because we are practitioners and and Indonesia is big, and I know there's no easy way to tackle this, and the government the last 5-7 years have been trying more, have been putting more effort, through initiatives like Dana Indonesiana. So I have to salute that. But it's just, how to say it? I think deep listening that I'm learning it from Hutan. Yeah? Hutan is about deep listening, actually, the word. So it's only through deep listening we can understand each context, because again, when it comes to traditions and localities, we talk about specificities, and I think Ananya already, like Ananya presentation, kind of like gave a landscape of all the important things that we have to, and government especially, we have to how do you say, to take to pay attention to, like so I think when it comes to traditional art forms, please do not approach it as a product. Maybe that's but it's a living tradition, it's a living practices. So it's maybe starting from this approach, then a much better practices can follow. It's very abstract, but conceptual, but yeah, long discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Heli. Ms. Jo also added deep listening and trust. Okay, do we have another question? Oh, okay, we have another question from Nandani Mulaining Luga. To all speakers, how do you negotiate creative differences between elders who protect tradition and younger artists who are eager to innovate? Very contextual to our topic today.
I think the previous answers are answering that. You have to create the spaces for listening, for dialogue, so that each understands the other. And if elders are wary of innovation, perhaps they're thinking of commodification. Perhaps they're worried that it is being used as a product. So as the process is changing, as the consciousness is building, if the elders also learn about that and see that happening, I don't think they'll be averse to it. At least from our experience, we see that the gurus, we call the masters, the aged veterans as gurus, they really come forward in these cultural collaborations.
Okay, any other speakers would like to add? Yes, Ms. Heli.
I think I witnessed some of these quote-unquote conflicts between artistic differences between in Gumarang Sakti, for example, and the late Ibu Gusmiati and Boy. And they were very open actually to talk about their differences because the way the art making was still back then was still very much like borrowing from the old times, like all the collaborators stay in one place for 3 to 6 weeks and sharing the spaces like every day. Although what they through making a piece. So I think it was widely documented their differences. So I think it's the context was kind of like specific because it's mother and son. But and within modern and contemporary context, because although the central of this is the Minang tradition, so I don't know. It's not. They negotiated, and they kind of like ended up influencing each other. For example, in the early years, Gusmiati were very reluctant to work with non-Minang dancers and dancer who didn't have any background in pencaksilat, for example. But Boy was so open about it because he started in Jakarta. So they were kind of like, arguing about it, over it. But in later years, Ibu Gusmiati was very open, inviting non-dancer to learn and study the form with them for a period of time and then perform in the piece. So the things that, the little story that I can share.
Thank you, Ms. Heli.
Can I also just add one thing? The idea of the, I think it's a natural thing to happen. Some people want change, some people don't want change. So if I go back to that story I told earlier about Hideo Kanze, who was a No performer from an ancient No family, when he wanted to get involved with, to innovate and to work with contemporary Japanese performers, his family said no, so they kicked him out. But another family then said, come and join us. We're really interested in your ideas. So you can come and explore your ideas with our No company. I think that not everybody is open to change, and I don't think that change is always necessary. But if you feel that you need to make changes as an artist, then you need to go and find your natural collaborator who will allow you to make the change that you feel is necessary.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jo. Okay, we'll go to our last question, I think, from Nuril from Jogja, Indonesia. Ketika berbicara tradisi atau kultur, etc., terkadang menuntut sesuatu yang holistik, tetapi ketika dihadapkan pada konteks ekonomi, terutama keberlanjutan suatu praktek atau keberlanjutan modal seniman untuk terus berkarya, hal itu menjadi menantang dan terkadang terlalu banyak blind spot. Adakah lewat pintu regional dialog seperti ini juga memberikan tips atau saran apa yang perlu ditonjol atau kuatkan, apakah narasinya, visualnya, PR-nya ini juga sebagai bahan seniman atau kolektif mempelajari medan? Okay, any of the speakers? Should I? Okay. Do we need translation? Yes, okay. Oh, I thought there were interpreters. Okay, so speaking about tradition or culture, sometimes we are asked to provide something holistic, but when we face economic context, especially on sustainability of a practice or a sustainability of the artist's resources to keep on creating works, that becomes something challenging, and sometimes it becomes there are too many blind spots. And through this regional dialogues, are there any suggestions on tips on how or what to emphasize, whether like we should strengthen the narratives, the visual, and what do we need to do as artists or collective to gain more understanding about the artistic field? Any of the speakers? Yeah, Maheli maybe?
Okay. I think what Nuril, yeah. I think we all have to start with our practice, whatever it is. For example, in my case, as a curator and dramaturg, and sometimes putting my head as a scholar because it involves a lot of research and writing. Start from one practice first, and then build it with some integrity. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's true. And I think you mentioned also here. I mean, in Indonesia is social capitals, like translated as resources. And I think, like Joe said, through friendship, artistic friendship, then a roadmap will be somehow there. Maybe not the whole roadmap, but it's step by step. So I mean that 25 minutes presentation that I said, it's encapsulated a lifetime of 25 years. But like a story of Gumarang Sakti, for example, it's me observing them for years. So I think you just have to start and believe in your practice, and then see how it leads you. So it's instead of like imagining strategies or but being true to one's practice. And then, things will start emerging, coming up. I think that's what I see from my experiences, or also other experience, like my peers. I don't know. What about you, Joe and Amint? It's such a big question. Yeah.
It
Yep.
is. Oh,
No, I think I'd say the same thing that it, there's no quick answer, and but embrace the mistakes along the way. You know, we aren't we're trying to learn from each other. We're trying to understand. You know that's I've been thinking a lot about this song by Leonard Cohen, which says, "Forget your humble offering. This is how the light gets in. The crack is how the light gets in." Sometimes when we make mistakes and there are cracks in our relationships or fissures in our relationships, we shouldn't see them as being problems. We should just think of them as being things where we can understand more, learn more, figure out more things. But it's only just to have the interest. And I think in this room, I think people are not here interested in exploiting or just taking away, not wanting to be extractive. My sense here is there are a lot of people who are cautiously interested in forming collaborations. Don't let the idea that there'll be problems get in the way of your beginning some kind of act of friendship. Yeah.
okay. I think because of the time, we will close here. So I hope all of the questions have been answered to your satisfaction. I'll recap a little bit about the presentations that have been presented earlier. So Ananya talked a lot about ethics of collaboration, right? Like how to make it transformative and not extractive. And we see that Ms. Ellie talked about the tension of what's traditional, and the tension with what's contemporary. And she also provided examples of how artists work on that. And also echoing that, Ms. Jo also talked about what's tradition in the context of exclusion and delegitimizing other cultural forms and other certain forms. And also talked about how instant coffee theaters and other artists work on this. And lastly, Dr. Amin also talked about choreo creation as a method to traverse and navigate this tension. Okay, so that is all for the discussion session, and we will move to the next activity very soon. Okay, we will have an interactive quiz as our next activity. It's time for a fun little quiz, and if you check the chat box below, there will be a link where you can access the quiz. You may also scan the QR code displayed on the screen. And please use your Zoom display name so it's easier for us to see who is in the room to sign up to the interactive quiz. Okay, we will join at menti.com. We use the code 31959954. Okay, we've got 12 players ready. 15, okay. You can use another device or the device you're currently using. I think it's a bit difficult with a phone, but okay, we've got 23 players at the moment. We have 5 questions in total, and this is where we will check our memory and understanding of the materials presented today. There will also be a little something for the winners of this quiz. So make sure you participate and try your best in choosing the right answer of the quiz. Okay, we've got more and more players coming in, okay. Hitting 30 players at the moment. Maybe we'll give it a little bit more time for the others to join in. Again, please be reminded to use your Zoom display name while joining Mentimeter. Again, yes, okay. Okay, I think we're starting soon. Okay, the quicker you respond, the greater point you'll get. What is the name of the traditional Indonesian dance performed at the coronation of a sultan? Budaya Ketawang, Saman dance, or Piring dance? Okay, we've got 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. And the answer is Budaya Ketawang. We've got 23 people getting the correct answer. Okay, let's look at the scoreboard. Okay, we have Nanda from Indonesia at the first place with 961 points. Okay, we'll move to the second one. Okay, we've got 35 players ready for this one. Okay, next question. A choreography method that integrates performance research community is an activity of which method? Improvisation, exploration, or choreo curating? Let's go. The quicker you answer, the greater point you'll get. We'll look at the answer in 3, 2, 1. And the answer is choreo curating. 26 correct answers. Let's look at the leaderboard. Has there been any change, any update? Okay. Okay, Nanda is still, oh, okay, there's a change. Congratulations, Kaika. Okay, we'll go to the next one. We have 39 players. Don't forget, speed matters. Speed affects your score. Let's go to the next question. The following are examples of choreo curating by Dr. Noraman Farid, except we have pok, opera, and mak-mak menari. Which one is not one of the examples of choreo curating by Dr. Noramin Farid? 3, 2, 1. The answer is opera with 22 correct answers. Let's check the leaderboard. Okay, we'll see. I think there is a change. Yes. Okay, Nanda is back on the first place. Okay, we'll look at the next question. Okay, 39 players. Still the same with this previous one. We'll go to the next question. Instant Cafe Theater Company presents tradition in its works in the form of political satire, comedy, or romance. First option is political satire there, comedy, or romance. The answer is political satire with 29 correct answers. Okay, let's look at the next one. The leaderboard, yes. Has there been any change? We're looking at a lot of new names. Still Nanda for being fastest. Speed matters, once again. Okay, let's look at the next question. Okay, we've got 39 players still. Yes, okay. Next question. This is your last question, your last chance of catching up. What is one of the core values in the 2003 UNESCO Convention? We have cultural diversity, aesthetics, or another option you can look at in your device, I believe. 3. Okay, everyone has voted. And the answer is cultural diversity with 34 correct answers. Okay, now let's check the leaderboard. We will find our winners. Has there been any changes? Okay, let's look at the top 3. Okay, the first one is Nanda from Indonesia with 4,734 points. Can we look at the other winners? Oh, okay. So congratulations for the winners. I think there will be more information in the chat box, but for the 3 winners, you can contact the ARS Management team or DM through social media to claim something for your winning. So thank you everyone for joining this exciting session. So that concludes our public webinar program after spending nearly 3 hours together. We hope that through this time of gathering, exchanging knowledge, and building connections, we have all gained meaningful insights and positive value to continue growing together. So once again, thank you to our speakers and all of our attendees from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore for your attention and active engagement. Our appreciation also goes to UNESCO Jakarta, Temasek Foundation, and our supporting partners, ARS Management Indonesia team, ERTI Research Collective Malaysia, and NAFA Singapore. Thank you for joining us. Sending warm regards from Citra Web Studio, and from our team from UNESCO and ARS Management are hosting this event. Signing off.